this is Houston. You are confirmed to go for orbit.
Imagine a force capable of shaking the very crust of the Earth. A force born of a controlled explosion so immensely powerful that, in a single second, it incinerates tons of propellant, reducing the concrete of Launch Pad 39A to scorched debris. It was at this exact moment, at the apex of the 363-foot Saturn V rocket, inside the cramped capsule of the Columbia, that three men froze. Locked within a space barely larger than the interior of a compact car, they heard something no one else on the planet could. Deep within the metallic bowels of the 30-story giant beneath them, the tanks groaned and vibrated, gorged with thousands of tons of freezing liquid oxygen and rocket fuel. The structure lived its own ominous mechanical life. The Earth within a radius of several miles convulsed with such violence that 1 million spectators lining the shores of Cocoa Beach physically felt the shockwaves slam into their chests.
I always think of a flight to the moon as being a long and fragile daisy chain of events. Links in that chain, certain finite points along the route have names for them, like it's going faster than escape velocity and slowing down into lunar orbit and so forth. But the point is, no matter how well things are going for you, you can't just relax and pat yourself on the back and say, well, isn't this wonderful? You have to say, okay, I got 17 down. What's number 18 coming up here? I better get on the ball and worry about it. So for me, at least, the flight was a question of being under tension, worrying about what's coming next and what do I have to do now to keep this daisy chain intact.
Inside the cabin, the three pilots experienced something far beyond the realm of human experience. The G-forces crushed them into their couches so fiercely that breathing became a struggle, and the instrument panel before Neil Armstrong's eyes dissolved into a blurred, vibrating haze. Yet, defying the laws of human nature, the commander's pulse remained astonishingly low for such a crisis, just 110 beats per minute. Cold pragmatism was at work, unflinching. The rocket pierced the dense layers of the atmosphere, carrying three lives into absolute merciless uncertainty, while billions back on Earth prayed for only one thing: that this triumph of engineering would not erupt into a ball of fire before their very eyes. The initial minutes of triumph were over. The rocket had done its job, casting its spent stages into the ocean, and the spacecraft settled into a temporary parking orbit around Earth. The tension inside Mission Control in Houston eased slightly, but everyone knew this was merely a brief respite before the ultimate leap. In our previous episode, we shattered NASA's flawless facade, uncovering the secrets of a brutal quarantine, hidden hardware failures, and the desperate death insurance signed by the first lunar crew. We saw the steep price they paid just to stand on that launch pad. But now, Earth is left behind. In this chapter, you will witness the shocking reality of cosmic survival inside 6 cubic meters, peer into the private diary of Michael Collins, and endure 34 minutes of dead silence with Houston as the spacecraft slips behind the far side of the moon. Welcome to Chapter 3 of our documentary series, The Leap into the Abyss, then Dead Silence. Two and a half hours after liftoff, having completed 1.5 orbits around the Earth, the crew received a terse, but fateful command from Houston.
Apollo 11, this is Houston. You are go for TLI, over. Apollo 11, thank you.
Translated from NASA's technical jargon, this meant igniting the third stage engine to execute the Trans-Lunar Injection maneuver, propelling the spacecraft out of Earth's orbit and onto a trajectory toward the Moon. This moment demanded surgical precision. The engine had to burn for exactly 350 seconds. Any miscalculation, a shutdown delayed by even half a second, would alter the trajectory so severely that the spacecraft would either hurtle into the infinite vacuum of deep space forever, becoming a flying tomb, or smash into the lunar surface at full speed. The engine roared once more, but unlike the cushioned rumble of the launch, this jolt was sharp, driving them forward. The spacecraft began to accelerate rapidly, shattering the invisible shackles of Earth's gravity. The velocity climbed second by second, 30,000 kilometers per hour, 35,000. At its peak, the instruments registered an astonishing figure: 39,000 kilometers per hour, roughly 24,000 miles per hour. At that moment in human history, it was the fastest any human being had ever traveled. Michael Collins later recalled how the view outside the window transformed during those minutes. The Earth, which had been a massive, all-consuming shield of blue and white, began to shrink before their eyes. It dwindled to the size of a large globe, then to a basketball.
We did it. We human beings left this dinky little planet, if you want to call it that. We have gone beyond the surface of our home planet, outward bound. And I think that's a wonderful unifying moment in our history.
They had broken free from orbit and were plunging into an abyss devoid of air, warmth, or the luxury of a single mistake. Once the romance of the initial hours wore off, the astronauts confronted a harsh, mundane, and deeply uncomfortable reality. For a modern audience raised on science fiction films featuring spacious spacecraft with artificial gravity and private quarters, it is difficult to grasp what the interior of the Apollo 11 command module actually was. 6 cubic meters. That was the entirety of their usable living space. Imagine being locked inside a small SUV with 2 of your colleagues, the seats ripped out, forced to spend 3 days there without any way to step out, roll down a window, or even stand up straight. In zero gravity, this space didn't feel larger. It felt chaotic. Hoses, flight plans, food ration packs, and tools floated everywhere. Any careless movement meant bumping an elbow into a crewmate or accidentally hitting a toggle switch on the control panel. There were no beds. Sleep meant curling up on the floor or beneath the main instrument panel, tucked into sleeping bags and tethered by straps to the structure to keep from drifting across the cabin and striking the console in the middle of the night. But the most grueling ordeal was the smell. Inside the spacecraft, a distinct heavy atmosphere quickly took hold. It was a cocktail of sweat, stale moisture, metallic dust, ozone from the electronics, and the toilet. Official NASA chronicles never dwelled on the crew's hygiene arrangements. In truth, they were primitive. There was no plumbing system. To collect solid waste, the astronauts used what were known as fecal bags, plastic pouches with an adhesive edge that had to be manually attached to the body. In weightlessness, this process became a complex, degrading medical operation that could take up to half an hour. But the most repulsive part came afterward. A capsule of a liquid antiseptic germicide had to be manually ruptured inside the bag, and the pouch then thoroughly kneaded by hand to mix the contents and prevent the buildup of gases that could rupture the plastic inside the cabin. Every such act was accompanied by a pungent foul odor that the environmental control system simply couldn't scrub fast enough. The food offered little comfort: dehydrated, freeze-dried meals in plastic packs that had to be reconstituted with warm water from a hose. The water often contained hydrogen bubbles due to the mechanics of the fuel cells, causing the crew persistent flatulence, which only exacerbated the already stifling air inside the cabin. This was no beautiful voyage to the stars. It was grueling, dirty, and exhausting labor under the most unforgiving psychological pressure. As they neared the moon, a silent divide grew within the crew, dictated by the flight plan. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin prepared for their historic step. They would transfer to the Lunar Module Eagle and attempt the landing. Michael Collins would remain behind in the Command Module Columbia, circling in lunar orbit. His task was no less critical, but from a psychological standpoint, it was far more tragic. Collins knew that if anything went wrong with the lunar module on the surface, if it damaged a landing gear leg, if the ascent engine failed to ignite, or if the cabin depressurized, Neil and Buzz would be stranded on the moon forever. And Houston would be entirely powerless to help. But the most terrifying realization was that Collins himself would be helpless. He had neither the fuel reserves nor the technical capability to descend and rescue them. In his private flight journal, which Collins kept hidden from Houston, he left entries staggering in their honesty and raw drama. This steadfast, steely professional wrestled at night with a creeping dread. My secret terror is leaving them behind on the moon and returning to Earth alone. If they fail to lift off, or if their module crashes, I am not going to commit suicide. I will ignite my engine and head for Earth. I know this, but I also know that from that moment on, I will be a marked man. For the rest of my days, I will carry the scar of being the sole survivor. The man who left his comrades to die in a frozen wasteland under the gaze of billions. Every time Collins looked at his crewmates checking their spacesuits, he realized he might be seeing them alive for the last time. This psychological burden weighed heavier on him than any G-forces at launch. He was trapped in a metallic hull hundreds of thousands of miles from home, haunted by the thought that in 2 days' time he might become the loneliest man in the universe. On July 19th, Apollo 11 finally reached the vicinity of the moon. Up close, our satellite looked nothing like it did from Earth. This was no romantic silvery disk. Before the astronauts lay a massive, ominous, dead monolith, scarred by thousands of meteorite impacts. The surface appeared a drab, lifeless grey. The moon seemed to offer a warning: you are not welcome here. To enter lunar orbit, the spacecraft had to perform its most complex maneuver yet: braking. This required firing the Main Service Propulsion System, or SPS engine. But the laws of orbital mechanics are unyielding. This maneuver had to take place at the exact moment the spacecraft slipped behind the far side of the moon. Passing behind the lunar disk meant one thing: a total, absolute loss of signal with Earth. The moon, composed of millions of tons of dense rock, completely blocked all radio transmissions.
Roger out.
And we've had loss of signal as Apollo 11 goes behind the moon.
Inside Mission Control in Houston, a ringing graveyard silence descended. The massive screens froze on the last received telemetry data. In that moment, the controllers on Earth knew absolutely nothing. Had the engine fired? Had it exploded, destroying the crew? Had the computer missed the orbit? 34 minutes. That was exactly how long the period of radio silence was scheduled to last. In Houston, young engineers sat motionless, terrified to move. The only sounds were the clicking of switches on consoles and the heavy breathing of men into their headsets. Flight Director Gene Kranz chain-smoked cigarette after cigarette, his eyes locked onto the countdown timer. Every second felt like an eternity. Meanwhile, on the far side of the moon, 3 men were suspended in absolute darkness. They flew over uncharted black territory, devoid of a single light or landmark. There was only the cold metal of the hull and the deep guttural roar of the engine, executing the burn in total isolation from humanity. For those 34 minutes, they were further from Earth than anyone had ever been before them. They were left entirely to themselves and to fate. The timer in Houston inexorably counted down the final seconds of the blackout. 3, 2, 1, 0. The telemetry screen remained blank. Another second passed, then a third. The tension in the room reached its absolute zenith. Cold sweat broke out on the brows of several engineers. And then, across millions of miles of cosmic vacuum, cutting through the crackle of static, the distant, calm voice of Michael Collins echoed in the speakers.
Apollo 11, Houston. Everything looks okay up here. Roger, reading you the same now. Could you repeat your burn status report? We copied the residuals and burn time, and that was about it. Send the whole thing again, please. It was like perfect.
Mission Control let out a collective breath. Some applauded, others buried their faces in their hands, fighting back tears. But it was too early to celebrate. The most perilous, critical phase of the mission was just beginning. July 20th. The day of separation arrived. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin transferred into the Lunar Module Eagle. They secured the hatch that separated them from Collins. The mechanical latches engaged with a heavy metallic thud. That sound meant there was no turning back. Collins flipped the switch to undock. The Eagle slowly, smoothly drifted away from the command module. Michael watched through the window as this strange, angular, spider-like craft carried his 2 crewmates down toward the craters. He knew their chances of survival were 50-50. Collins keyed his microphone and uttered a phrase that would remain forever in the NASA archives.
Roger, Eagle, 10 dots. Roger, how does it look? The Eagle has wings. Roger. Looking good.
Mike, how did it go? Over.
Listen, Dave, everything's going just swimmingly. Beautiful.
Great. We're standing by for Eagle.
The Eagle turned and began its landing. Ahead lay a descent unlike anything in human history. A descent where, at any second, the computer would throw fatal alarms, fuel would vanish before their eyes, and jagged boulders of an unexplored crater would await them directly on their path. But they did not know this yet. In the next chapter of our series, we will tell the story of the most dramatic landing of the 20th century. You will discover how Neil Armstrong was forced to override the automation seconds before impact, and why the entire team in Houston nearly suffocated from tension as the Eagle kicked up the lunar dust. Subscribe to the channel right now so you don't miss the fourth and final chapter of our story. Like this video and be sure to let us know in the comments. Which phase of this journey do you find the most terrifying? The grim, unhygienic isolation in the cramped cabin, Michael Collins' private nightmare of utter solitude, or those 34 minutes of graveyard silence behind the moon? Stay with us. The most dangerous minute in human history is about to begin. See you on the moon.